All right, so today's topic, cycles in nature. And we will not spend time in class going over this topic because everyone will be presenting their cycles presentations today. So the topic leads to our driving question: how did biogeochemical cycles maintain life on Earth? That's uh, our driving question for today. So looking at biogeochemical cycles, um, we're thinking about specific elements, nutrients that are required for living things. The main three that we focus on are carbon and its interaction with nitrogen, um, and phosphorus and nitrogen. So these are essential nutrients for living things. And a lot of the cycles relate to one another and kind of interact and are involved in a varied response as far as maintaining a balanced ecosystem. So we have to consider, well, how can this be unbalanced, and what happens in an unbalanced ecosystem? So autotrophs are going to use carbon. Here's an example of a river, and there's lots of algae on the top, and those algae are going to use carbon and produce oxygen. Um, but one thing that does happen in dark reactions for photosynthesis, this is going to produce a lot of CO2 in the water. So at night or on a cloudy day, it's going to produce a lot of CO2. The other thing is this algae is shading out living organisms beneath it. So all the other plants and materials inside the river, they can start to decompose and they decay. And this increases carbon because decaying material is eaten by decomposers like bacteria. And the bacterial activity inside the river consumes not only the dead decaying plants and algae, but it also consumes oxygen because they're heterotrophic organisms, many of them are. And once they start consuming at a large quantity, um, this will cause fish kills because the oxygen level, the dissolved oxygen in the river will crash. And you see these, here's a picture of a lot of dead fish on a beach. So this has a lot of effect on the overall ecosystem. Um, there's also, the effect that carbon has on ocean acidification or creating acid rain. In large scales, the ocean mixes with the atmosphere with higher levels of CO2. It can lead to accumulation of carbonic acid. Acid rain typically has a negative effect on insects, specifically insects with shells, because it tends to break down the shell, which can have an overall large effect on the ecosystem. So thinking about, the abiotic and biotic factors, especially relating to microbial activity, bacteria, um, these microbacterial communities have thrived throughout the entire geological history of Earth. And despite what happens on Earth, they will, always remain just because they're very diverse. They can handle fluctuations in the environment, and they're very highly adapted organisms. Even there are some, specific bacteria that are adapted to really harsh conditions. Some archaeans that can consume sulfur instead of carbon, and they don't need oxygen. They're anaerobic, and they also have the ability to fix nitrogen from the air. So there's some really specialized organisms that can thrive regardless of the conditions on Earth. Microbes are a huge part of the biogeochemical process. So here's the data that I cited, and for future reference, this is how you would cite data for any presentation or um, paper that you would write for me in class. It's a, a right indent after the first line, the author's names first, and then the title in quotations, followed by the name of the journal article or website, the date, and the page number, if there is a page number involved. So that's the last slide of this unit of notes. We'll be completing a unit test over this first section sometime this week. So, be prepared for that and look over the rest of the units before you take your test.